everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we are doing the 9th episode of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So we're getting through the first season, which is great. This is called Those Who Wander, I believe is the title of the episode. It's a good episode. This is the episode that is basically straight up just aliens. It's just the second film in the Alien franchise, kind of. There's a lot of homages in it, or rip-offs, I'm not sure. Right? There's a fine line between that kind of stuff. In this case, I feel like it has to be an homage because it is so blatant. Like, I mean, with Newt, with having the little girl that's running from the aliens, and then this woman shows up and helps her, and there's a lot of similarities between Aliens and this, and a lot of differences too. So this episode has it's got a B story of Uhura deciding whether or not she's going to stay on the Enterprise, which once again is a huge decision, which doesn't necessarily belong in a show like this. So I'm really glad that they're making that decision in this episode, which is great. So we don't have to keep watching that, even though we know the outcome. Because we don't come to this show to watch people cry, right? We're not here to see people emote. There are plenty of shows that do that, and it's a legitimate thing. People like to watch that. There are shows where there's somebody crying every 4 minutes, I swear, right? And you can watch that. But that's not really what Star Trek is. So they do deal with that, which is great. One thing that I did notice, which is really cool, is they first off, in the beginning, they have a really neat discussion about a couple of the ships in the show. Now, I don't know a lot about the ships in the show. I'm not I can't be like, that's a Galaxy class or whatever. I have no idea. But they talk about that kind of stuff because there's a ship that's crashed and they need to go help this crashed ship. Then, everything they've discussed, they kind of turn around and show, which is really neat. They've got this great scene where the shuttles are coming down into the atmosphere and there's this wrecked ship in the background and they land in front of it. It's some cool stuff. They put a lot of computer work into this episode and it's pretty neat. It's good to watch. I enjoy it a lot because this show has a gimmick, which I like. It's a cool gimmick. They have a room that is completely surrounded by screens. So anytime like you're in engineering and you see that huge image of the engine behind them, that big glowing beacon thing behind them, that's not computer generated on a green screen. That is an actual image that the actors are seeing while they're standing in that set. And they use that room often. Anytime you go anywhere in this show and they're surrounded by some kind of effect, they're standing in that room and they've just turned it on all the screens. And that's cool. I like that, but it's also neat to see some outside stuff as well. And this episode does a really good job of that because they land on this snow planet. Yeah, so that's a very cool thing, all that ship stuff. I enjoyed the conversation and the look of it. There's a great moment where they're searching the ship and Uhura is with them, with Una and Pike. And this weird alien runs out and tries to start talking to them, and the alien has a weapon. And no, it's not Una. It's head of security. I've forgotten her name, but whoever the head of security is. And Pike and the head of security don't know what to do because they don't know if they should just shoot him. And so she says, Uhura, do something. And Uhura says, that's not how linguistics works, which I thought was really cool. And it's also nice to see each of these characters kind of utilize their strengths in weird situations. That's a good quality of this show, I believe, is we get to see people perform at their best in the areas that they're good at. And I like that a lot. Uhura has, she's been bouncing around a lot. This is literally the episode where they assign her to her bridge position. Now, they've utilized her in that bridge position in the past, but she's also been utilized in engineering and I think a couple other places as well, security. Um, but this is the episode where they literally say, we're going to put you in this position on the bridge. It's a cut scene. The cut scenes in this are great, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Um, so I appreciate seeing her try to be utilized in that way, even if this is not the most appropriate place to use that. And she still comes through. She comes up with a good idea, which is, wait, there's two people, so this person must be protecting somebody else, so they're probably a good guy, right? Um, so that's cool. But it's neat to see people show their strengths in their positions. There's a really interesting, cool moment where the doctor says, "Stop harassing my daughter." And the reason that I like it is because the head of security is kind of flipping out. And you think that this scene is about her and her flipping out. But then when the doctor steps in, which would be traditional in a scene like this, the doctor steps in and says, "You need to get it together, quit bothering this girl." And she learned something about herself, right? The head of security. Instead of that, they have the doctor kind of flip out a little bit more, which is a really interesting, weird choice, which I liked. They're really playing with horror in this episode. They want this to be scary and they want it to be shocking. And I don't know how much I love that aspect of it, but I feel like this kind of stuff, even though it's not my favorite thing, I think they did a good job of it, which is cool. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit, I believe. But I really appreciated that sort of turnaround in this because then eventually he has to go apologize to her and they just do it again there as well. He goes in and he says, "Look, when there's a lot of trauma, things happen." And she's like, "I know, I'm sorry." And he's like, "No, no, no, I'm talking about me." Right? So it's just this neat, weird kind of flip on that, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really cool. There, because they're going for the horror and the gore, there's some gross stuff in this episode. Some stuff that I don't generally enjoy that kind of stuff. They do a good job of it, like I was saying. That they want. I mean, it's just a bold choice, right? I think you can always appreciate when a bold choice is made. Whether or not you agree with the choice isn't really that important. You know, I like to talk about it. That's why I'm bringing it up here. But it's not my favorite choice. But they do push that a little bit here, and it is pretty gross. Not my favorite stuff. But the aliens popping out of the other alien, and it's pretty gross. It's pretty dang gross. And there's dead bodies with like blood flowing out of their head, and I mean it's pretty out there. They go extreme. So there's kind of another homage in this, which is from Predator. They do the kind of Predator vision. I think the Predator sees heat, not light, right? And that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger can hide in the mud, and then the Predator can't see him. And I think they do the same thing with the Gorn in this. They just you can tell you're looking from the Gorn's point of view because of the height of the camera and the sound effects and all that stuff. Um, and it's this sort of heat vision thing, and it's moving towards the characters, it's following them. They do some neat stuff with that, which is kind of scary and kind of fun, especially in corridors. You know, Like Predator does a good job of it, but because they're out in the jungle, it's not quite as effective as it is inside of a spaceship where something's following you. And you get this kind of weird shining feeling, right? Like with the camera following the big wheel through the halls, it's kind of claustrophobic and it's cool. It's a neat thing that they do with the Predator stuff. So there's a character named Duke that you meet for the first time in this, and he gets a promotion, and then he gets killed, and it's kind of obvious that he's going to get killed. It's kind of obvious. I feel like, in a weird way, this is like our first red shirt character. He's not wearing a red shirt, of course. I'm not sure how all that works in all of this. It's like the ships, once again. I don't really know the ranks. I know that captains wear gold. I think that that's a thing, right? But I don't understand the blue and the red and all that. But he's not wearing a red shirt, but he does get killed, and I feel like he's one of our first red shirts. Of course, there's the guy much earlier in the episode where the ghosts come and save them from the storm. He's also kind of a red shirt because he's the first one to show you the effect of the light, and he slams his head through the window. So we've had a couple red shirts, and that's kind of fun, I think, to be like, uh-oh, that guy's going to die. So there's a moment where Nurse Chapel protects herself from an alien. There's an alien chasing her. You can see the predator vision, right, coming after her. She jumps up on one of the medical beds and she turns on a force field. And this force field, it's cool. Like, that's a smart choice, right? Nothing can get through the force field. The problem is it's a cylinder without a top and a bottom. So the alien could come up through the floor or come down through the ceiling. And the only reason I mention this at all is because the minute she turns it on and sits up on the bed, they shoot her from the floor up. So you can see the ceiling with all of this stuff, vents and weird things up there, without the force field effect over it. So it just makes me wonder what the force field is for. Because I would assume in a medical area, the force field is for a couple reasons. Number one, to prevent someone who's incredibly panicked or enraged from getting out, right? I can see that, I guess. But also disease, I would assume, right? If somebody has a virus, you're going to want to confine them, you know? So that struck me as a tiny bit odd, and it actually made me think of the previous episode where the doctor is pouring these gases together and it kind of explodes, and this puff of gas comes out and he starts coughing and backing up, and this little force field comes on over the experiment. But it doesn't contain the gas or the coughing doctor, you know? What I would have liked to have seen is a force field come on that was big enough to encompass all the smoke. So it would basically go over him about down to his waist, and in just the entire cloud of smoke would be in the force field. And as he backed up coughing, it would literally let him out, but not let the smoke out. So that he would stop coughing because the irritant would have stayed, it would have come, I guess, back out his nose or whatever, you know what I mean? The irritant would have stayed in the force field and he would be out of the force field just fine. I think that would be a better use of that. And in this case, of course, I think that having a cylinder force field that is clearly designed just to hold something out or something in a little bit, as long as they can't go up and down, I don't know. That just struck me as a little bit odd. It was just an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up. So there is a weird thing that happens in this episode that I got to bring up. This honestly, it's moments like this that kind of inspired me to make this thing. There's like 8 different things that I really want to talk about the first episode of Star Trek. And I realized that doing an episode by episode was probably the only way to get to everything. So In this episode, you've got Kirk's brother, right? And he spazzes out bad, right? And granted, they're in a tough, weird situation, and he's a scientist, right? He's not a soldier, he's a scientist. But he flips out, and they do this weird thing where he attacks Spock. And he calls him pointy eared and that kind of stuff, right? Which we've seen in the past. And my first thought was, oh, they're trying to do the Bones thing, right? Because Bones and Spock have a very good relationship with each other, but Bones, being a doctor, cannot handle Spock's callous approach to the loss of life, right? Bones must save people. It's important to him. And Spock will say things out loud that don't necessarily need to be said, right? So I really love that aspect of Bones and Spock because it says a lot about Bones and how passionate he is about saving people that he would literally attack his friend for saying callous things, you know? And of course, Bones also knows that Spock doesn't get riled. You know, if Spock yelled at him and was hurt, Bones would probably stop doing it. But because Spock is unaffected by it, all Bones can do is kind of lash out, you know. So they do this thing with Kirk where he does kind of a similar thing, but it really doesn't work because Kirk is not a doctor. Kirk isn't coming from a place of saving lives. He's just spazzing out because he thinks he's going to die. So it really just makes him look like an idiot. And then I thought, maybe they're doing the aliens thing, right? With, I'm not going to remember his name, but there's the actor in there who says, oh man, we're bobbing, game over, man. Right? I mean, he just flips out because he knows he's going to die. And they're, through the whole film, they're really pointing out what an idiot and an ass this guy is, you know? So it's kind of funny to think of it that way, but at the same time, do you want one of your main characters to be an idiot ass anytime something goes wrong? I mean, he flips out, you know? So the only thing that I could kind of equate it with, which I don't think is what they had in mind, but I really think this is what they came up with, is Guy from Galaxy Quest. I mean, when Guy, if you haven't seen Galaxy Quest, you have to see it, okay? It's not the greatest movie ever made or anything weird like that, but if you like Star Trek, you will see a lot in Galaxy Quest that you can really appreciate. It's great. So, Guy, I think his name is Max Rockwell or something like that. He flips out because he thinks he's going to die, right? And he's not a soldier. In fact, in Galaxy Quest, they're actors, right? They're literally doing the William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy kind of thing. Okay, they're actors on a sci-fi show who get put in a sci-fi situation. And he freaks out and he goes through this whole monologue with Sigourney Weaver about how he's going to die because his character doesn't have a last name and all characters without last names die, which is kind of a play on the red shirt thing, right? So he's totally flipping out, and Sigourney's Weaver is like trying to keep him calm, like you have a last name, Guy, right? But he just gets worse and worse. And I think they kind of ended up with Guy in this episode, which is not a great choice, I don't think. You know, I mean, honestly, I don't think anyone would care about the character of Guy if it wasn't done by Rockwell, I think is his name. He he does such an amazing job. It's one of the best comedic performances I think I've ever seen. And the reason I say that, because you don't see this very often in film, there's a scene where they're being teleported through space onto the ship. and they've never been in space. They know nothing about space. They're just actors, right? But they get teleported through space. And when they're on the ship, all of a sudden, they're all scared. They're freaked out because of what they witnessed. And they go in order. I think they start with Sigourney Weaver and then they go down the line. And they're all freaking out the way a screen actor would freak out, right? Sigourney Weaver's scared, and then the guy from Tool Time or whatever is scared. They just go down the cast, and then they get to him, and he is acting. I mean, he is acting so hard. I mean, he's literally gone pale, and he looks like he's about to puke. He's convulsing, and I mean, he's tearing up the scenery, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Like his ability to be in that moment is insane, and it's hysterical. And that's probably the best moment to see the difference between Guy's performance and the rest of the cast, who all did a fine job, right? There's nothing wrong with any of those actors at all. But he definitely takes it one step further. And to see that comparison just in a line of acting ability, bam, 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 and I do want to point out that we talked about types earlier, right? There's a broader version of types, where you can either be a character actor or a lead actor, right? And we go through these lead actors. Lead actors don't do that kind of stuff because it makes them look weird, right? Like if you watch Brad Pitt in 12 Monkeys, that could have hurt his career. It really could have hurt his career to go that extreme from the leading man stuff that he'd been doing, right? It didn't, fortunately, which is cool. It's neat that people could say, I still like Brad Pitt, even though he's a total freak in this movie, right? So that's cool. I'm glad that the audience didn't turn on him because he chose to make those bold choices. But most of the time, leading actors don't dare to do that kind of stuff, or they can't do it. They're not built to work that way. Sam Rockwell really isn't a leading man. So he's built for that, and man, he just crushes it. Sorry, I got off on a thing there, but Kirk should not be Guy. That is too weird. That was such a bizarre choice, and I don't think that worked the way they wanted it to. And in their defense, in the cut scenes, everybody flips out. Okay? That scene starts with Kirk flipping out, but then everybody starts yelling and fighting because they're all terrified. And in that sense, I think it kind of works, but the scene itself doesn't really work. I believe because it's not really Star Trek. I mean, they've been in bad situations before. You know what I mean? It fits the genre, but it doesn't fit the show. So I understand why they cut that stuff, but to leave Kirk's in, I think really hurts Kirk's performance and the actor's performance and kind of the show in that area. It's a weird moment. I can definitely see where they were coming from because I have the discs and I could see the deleted scenes, but it just didn't work. It did not work out. So too bad for Kirk, because it makes him look kind of weird. Pike's command code is cool. I think it's 246810. That reminded me of the first. Yeah, and I think the doctor's there and he says, you still haven't changed that? Which is cool. I really like that. It reminded me of Kirk because of course, he's just Kirk's type. He's just Kirk. He's Kirk. I know he's playing Pike. The actor's playing Pike, but it's Kirk. In the first film, or maybe the second film, maybe it's, I should have looked into this more. There's a moment where Kirk needs to he needs to make the ship blow up. and he has to give his command code, and it's like 000 or something, right? It's something really, really simple, which I really enjoyed, just so he can remember it like that. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to forget it. So that's cool. I really like that. Um, so Spock has to get angry in this episode. And this is a very important part of Spock's character that I don't like very much. I just want to say it's very important that they touch on the fact that Spock is half human and half Vulcan, that he can become over emotional if he's not careful, right? It's an important part of his character. I just don't enjoy, because I think honestly because they go too far. I hate to say it. Like Spock flies off into this rage in this episode to the point that he almost hurts um, Nurse Chapel. And you get this weird vibe like, what's that goofy Twilight? Like Twilight. Like, this high school girl falls in love with a vampire who really wants to kill her but really likes her, and then there's this werewolf that really wants to kill her but really likes. I'm like, what the hell? I mean, putting that kind of violence in a relationship, like, it's okay to be angry and to lash out, because your woman will be there. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know. I feel like they just go too far sometimes with that kind of weird emotional outburst, because honestly, the thing that we love about Spock, I believe straight up, is when he feels like he's acting out, but he looks like a robot, so he apologizes for acting out. Right? That moment in the restaurant when he walks up to the doctor and the other person, and he's like, "I'm sorry you had to see me get emotional like that." And they're like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Right? I mean, it's brilliant. That is Spock. That is Spock's human side, right? Spock is not completely human. So the average human emotions he will have less of. And he's not completely Vulcan. So the average ability to hide those emotions he will not have. It's less of each, right? It shouldn't be more of each. And I do understand that the reason that they've hidden their emotions is because they used to be more. I get that. But humans used to be more too, honestly. I mean, that civilization has been around for generations and generations and generations. They have mellowed, you know. They have social faux pas, and I mean, Spock grew up on Vulcan, controlling his emotions. He would certainly be better at it than a human. And I know that he needed to. It's just this weird gimmick where you have to be mad at the monster to make it chase you, which, yeah, okay, I don't know. I don't like to see it that extreme because it makes weird things happen. There's another thing that happens in season 2 that we'll talk about at that time, but yeah, I didn't appreciate that conversation in the hallway. Hammer's great in the episode, of course. And spoiler alert, he dies in the episode. I'm sure you've all seen it. He does a really good job. The actor's great. This is another example of us not needing old characters in order to enjoy a new Star Trek show. We don't need it. Now, I do understand that if once a season you put in an old character, you're going to get a rating boost. I get that. But like this whole legacy thing that they're talking about, it doesn't. I think they're getting the wrong idea. If you look at Picard season 1 and how bad that is because it's just Game of Thrones and we didn't have a normal Star Trek to watch, I don't think, at the time. So nobody liked it. If you look at that and then look at season 3 and how successful it was, I can see that you could get the wrong idea and say, oh, people like season 3 because we had more of the old people come back. Right? And that is not the case. Okay, it was fun to see them, of course. It's okay to throw them in every once in a while. But people liked 3 better than 1 because 3 was more like Star Trek and we had Strange New Worlds. Right? It was okay to branch out a little bit in Picard because we knew next week we'd just be watching Strange New Worlds again. Right? So I think they kind of got the wrong idea about the need for having these old characters. We don't need it. You could easily have a Star Trek that's 500 years in the future, like whatever the Discovery, right? You could easily have that. And as long as it was Star Trek, people would love it. Right? No one would care if there wasn't any old characters on it. And every once in a while, you could find somebody trapped in a buffer or, a robot gets put back together or whatever, right? You could do it. They find a hologram with a message from Kirk, whatever, right? You could totally do it. Um, but it's not vital. And the reason I bring that up is because they kill off Hemmer because eventually we're going to get Scotty, which is fine. I like Scotty, right? It'll be fun to see him. But there was nothing wrong with Hemmer. And I hope that the creators can understand that having a Monster of the Week Star Trek makes Star Trek good. I mean, straight up. It doesn't matter who the characters are. As long as they're part of Starfleet and Starfleet is functioning and nice, right? I mean, you're just making Star Trek. It's not that hard. But they killed off Hemmer, and that's okay. I think their justification was that it helps Uhura decide to stay on the ship, which is fine, right? They got through that stuff. I'm really glad they didn't try to stretch it out to season 5 or 6. I do not want to see. I don't want to cut away to Uhura on her home planet as her father passes away and she thinks about going back to Starfleet, but she can't do it because she's embarrassed, right? We don't want to watch any of that crap. We just want to watch the crew of the Enterprise solve problems together. That's what we want. So the deleted scenes in this are really good. Not in the sense that like they should have been in the show. Why did they cut such important? It's not like that. You can basically, I think you can kind of tell why each of them is cut. The only one that I kind of questioned is Uhura saying, "I want to stay," and they cut that, which I thought was a really weird choice. Now, she does step onto the bridge and look at the station that she'll be associated with in the future. Right? There is that scene. And I do think you get the idea that she's going to stay from that. But I do think it would have been really nice to have her literally say, "I'm staying, I want it," and them to say, "Good, that's your chair." Right? I think that would have been cool. That's the only one that was cut that I was kind of like, oh man, they should have kept that. But they're all really cool scenes. It's definitely worth checking out. And there's a few of them. There's like 5 or 6. They cut a lot from this episode. I think it's really worth checking out. This was a really good episode. I had a blast with this. It's different than Star Trek, that's for sure. I would have called this the Halloween episode. I don't remember when it came out, but when they were doing when they actually had true seasons and they were making enough episodes to cover a year, which they're not doing now, which bothers me, but that's another thing. When they were actually doing that, they would have a Halloween episode and probably a Christmas/New Year's episode as well. But I would have called this the Halloween episode because it's trying to be very scary and a bit gory, and it's really kind of pushing the bounds of that. But I enjoyed it. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I think the tech in it's great. The stuff that they talk about and the stuff that they show, they put a lot of money into this. I'm not sure if they were thinking this would be the season finale. I sort of get that feeling that they thought this might be the season finale, but then they changed their mind and they went with the other episode as the last episode, which we'll get to soon. But it's really good. It's very enjoyable. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button. And if you want more of this, of course, please subscribe. We love that. And have a great day.